Hello, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Swimming Parent Support live stream from Propulsion Swimming in partnership with AP Race Clinics. I'm your host, Scott, and back with me is Kev Pickard from AP Race Clinics, Parent Support Station, and my good friend Dan, who also runs Propulsion Swimming with me. Today's live stream, we are going to be focusing on winter training. And as always, it's a question and answer. So if anyone has any questions involving this topic, please submit them into the chat and we will bring them up on the live stream. Guys, how are you doing today?
Very good. A little bit different doing it in the morning compared to what we did last month. Hopefully we get more people following in, and please send your questions in. We've had some questions come in already from Instagram and on Twitter as well. So if you're watching live, do put your questions in on the comments on YouTube, and then we will answer them, or Kev will anyway.
Well, I think we're going to spread the load this morning, but yeah, really good to be back. Everyone's had their caffeine hit, so we're wide awake and ready to go. I can already see questions and comments coming in, which is great. So keep it up, people.
Definitely. So for anyone who hasn't watched this live stream before, why are we doing this? Well, we went to an AP Race Clinics in the summer, myself and Dan, and the first station we went to was Kev's Parent Support Station, and we thought, this is a topic in swimming that isn't covered enough. There isn't enough support out there for you parents, and especially not a platform where you can ask educated individuals inside the sport questions about your children's swimming. So essentially what we want to do is set up this live stream every month. I think we're targeting the first weekend of every month to do this and give you guys a place where you can ask Kev, other swimmers, hopefully, that are going to come on, questions about your children's swimming.
Yeah, we find it's a very unique thing, and actually no one, as far as we know, no one in the country is doing it apart from AP with Kev on his station. We just want to give parents the resources that they not normally would get at, let's say, a swimming club, or deserve. Yeah, exactly. So this is why we're pushing it every month. There's going to be, ideally in our heads right now, rough draft, we're going to do a different topic every month. This month it's winter training. Next month we'll do something else, whether it's competitions or whatever it would be. So yes, send your questions in and we will get answering.
So let's start off with winter training then as a whole. Why are we covering this as a topic?
I think it's for everyone out there, it's a really challenging time of year, because if we discount the pandemic, winter training is always a challenging period of time anyway. It's darker, it's colder. Swimming generally operates morning and evening, so you're getting to the pool in the morning when it's dark, you're leaving when it's dark, and it's a challenging time just from a motivation and engagement point of view. Generally, during that period leading up to Christmas, there's not a huge amount going on because of Christmas, and those first few weeks in January, it's getting back into the swing of things. So it's a really challenging time of year. And I think off the back of that, there's lots of other things, pandemic aside, different things around health, nutrition, the types of training that you're doing, what time you're training, how much you're training. And then we've got obviously counties and other things coming up. So there's a lot of people starting to think back in the mindset of competitions, but equally throw a pandemic into it and there's even more challenges. So I think it's a really interesting time and challenging time for a lot of swimmers out there. And certainly with the younger swimmers, they look up and get so much support from their parents. So ultimately, we're not saying we've got all the answers, we're informed. I hope we've got a great network within our sport, but ultimately we just want to give a platform for people to come together and air their thoughts. And if we can help them, then, it's a great big tick for us.
Yeah, definitely. I always remember January, February, maybe even March, the meterage just went up and up and up. So sometimes motivation is always a little bit of a factor. We've actually had a question in from motivations, which we'll answer later on. But yes, I think it's, especially when it's cold outside and it's dark, like Kev was saying, it's challenging, isn't it? It is challenging, but yeah.
So first question coming into the live chat. Let's start there. How much focus should be on improving technique versus strength and fitness? Now, I'm guessing this depends on age as well. So if you are watching and could submit sort of the age of your swimmer that we're looking at, that'd be really helpful as well. But Kev, do you want to kick things off on this topic?
Yeah, definitely. And I think any type of training this time of year is not going to be ideal. Nobody chooses in an ideal setting to get out of bed at 4:30 in the morning on a Monday morning in the middle of January when it's -5 and de-ice the car and go down the pool and then go off to school and all those sorts of things. But ultimately, that is what it is. So I think there's an aspect to training, whether it's in the pool, on land, all of those sorts of things, that it's there, but it's different for every single club and every single swimmer around the country, because you might have a kid that's preparing for mock exams for their GCSEs, for example, in the next few weeks. That's going to be a completely different discussion to, say, a 12-year-old, which is the example that we're talking about here. And actually, for a 12-year-old, how can we make that experience of getting through January, February, March as engaging and as exciting as possible? Now, if you go down to an individual club level, some clubs might have 5 sessions a week available for a 12-year-old. Another club might have 2 and then a land session. So actually, it's not so much around strength and technique and all these different things. It's actually saying, look, what's the objective? Well, we want to keep our kids, especially at that age, as engaged as possible and enjoying their sport. Now, that might be they're going to be focusing on skills in training, and the language their coach is using is talking about skills. And then other times they might be working on like fundamental movement patterns. So if you look at the land training programs that are generally delivered to age groupers, they're built around just fundamental movement patterns and building very basic strength. So I think it's not a one size fits all, but ultimately at that young age, the most important thing is that your 12-year-old is still engaged in the sport and activity. And how you do that, that's a parent preference, but also it's going to be contextually different for every swimmer out there, because every club offers a different program, if you like. And certainly post-pandemic, in terms of the pools being open again, perhaps the pool time and the sessions available both on land and in the water are not going to be ideal and perfect. So it's actually going, look, what do we need to do to keep our 12-year-old engaged in the sport?
When I was sort of 12 years old, and I don't know, I think that was the point where I first joined a club. And for me, what we were looking at was more just fundamentals of every topic. So it wasn't specializing on technique. And I didn't know I was specializing on technique at 12-year-olds, but it was building, it's almost that first layer of the pyramid. You're building the blocks for keeping them in the sport and their future development through the sport as well.
Yeah, it's got to be about enjoyment at that age. I mean, you're not going to win Olympic gold at 12 years old. It's impossible. So you do need to keep them in the sport, fully engaged, enjoying what they're doing. For me, I think technique at that age is absolutely paramount. Strength isn't really a factor. As Kev was saying about the movement patterns, the fundamental movement patterns, maybe a bit of core would be in there. So really, that's the sort of strength side of it. But yeah, I think technique, maybe a little bit of fitness, because I was talking about the meterage, but again, we're dealing with a 12-year-old and it's just about enjoyment as of right now, I think.
I think like another thing I'd throw in there is I've had it described from people in different sports as almost like building a house. When they're that young, you're effectively laying the foundations, and that's not just laying foundations from a swimming point of view. You're laying the foundations for the whole of their life. Their traits, their behaviors, their habits, their nutritional awareness, their sleep patterns, their education, their handwriting skills, their speaking skills, all these other things. So I think ultimately we're actually looking at a much wider thing here. It's not just a swimming lens we're looking through. You know, a 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old is very early on their swimming journey. So ultimately in all aspects of their life, we want to make sure we lay all the foundations properly, so that if they get older and they decide they want to just swim twice a week and stay in the sport for fitness and health, that actually they're enjoying it enough to carry on doing that. And equally, if they decide they want to step it up and go off and swim full time at the age of 18 or something, that they've got the foundations of skill, strength, and everything else to go and do that. But equally, there's so many other things that contribute to that experience as a 12-year-old, the social aspects of it, you know, and those sorts of things, that making sure those things are accounted for, because if they're not, you won't get them to 14 or 15. They'll just drift off away from the sport.
Yeah.
Okay, next question in the live chat. Is it purely personal preference on whether early mornings or late night sessions suit your swimmer?
That's a nice one. 10 past 10 in the morning, we're already throwing me a curve. A couple of things with that. I think we've got to almost, to start with, remove the individual and look at it pragmatically. No swimming club in this country, unless they're very, very lucky, has what I would call the ideal training right now. They just haven't, because of COVID restrictions, because of pool time availability, etc., etc. So firstly, at that for a young age swimmer, in front of them is what they've got. So whether that's 3 mornings a week, 5 evenings a week, 1 evening a week, you know, every club will have whatever it's got. So I think at that point, it's then actually going, well, what works for us as a family? What works for that person logistically? Where are they on their progression journey? Because ultimately, if they're doing 4 evenings a week at 13, and the only other sessions they can add on are mornings, well, the next logical step is to do mornings. Equally, I know some clubs out there, having spoken to coaches around the country, that only have morning access right now because their pool provider have said we're closing at 5 o'clock and you can't come in the evenings. So again, it doesn't matter whether your personal preference is morning or evenings, you've only got mornings available. So I think it's different for everybody, but ultimately it has to be progressive. And the other thing is it has to be fitting in with all the other aspects of their life, because there's no point in them doing a morning training session on a Monday and it doesn't work for them, and the rest of their week they don't turn up for evening training because they're so wiped out. But in the same way, they don't want to be in a program where they've got aspirations to go to the nationals or go to the Olympics or whatever it is, and they're turning up once a week and thinking that's going to cut it, because it's not. So I think ultimately there's a journey that swimmers are going to go on where they progress through both mornings and evenings in terms of amount of sessions, but ultimately there's also lots of other things to consider. It's not as black and white as just pool time, because like I said, there isn't from what I've seen post like all the lockdowns that we've had, clubs have not got what they need ideally out there, so it's always going to be a compromise.
Yeah. Should we talk about the ideal Olympic swimmer then? As an example, when you get to that elite stage, what are they likely to do in a morning session versus an evening session? Is there a difference when you get to elite level?
I think once you get to an elite level, to be honest, it's what the individual needs. Generally, you've got to treat it, once you're a senior international full-time swimmer, that's your full-time job. So from 7 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock in the evening, that day, and it's different for everybody, is made up of training in the pool, on land, different physiotherapy treatments, psychology work, nutrition workshops, commercial potential activities. Some of these athletes that haven't got sponsorship and support are working jobs. They've got all these other things that they've got to factor into that. So I think the ideal situation is going to be very much suited around the individual. That I've seen some fascinating comparisons between some of the different elite senior international medalists that we've had over the years. And actually, they're all doing different stuff. As a whole, they're all doing a decent amount in the pool, a decent amount on land. They're focusing on nutrition, et cetera, et cetera. But how that is put together is going to be different for everyone. So I might go in and watch, Adam, for example, doing a morning session, and he might be doing something completely different to James Guy down in Bath or Duncan Scott up in Stirling, because it's what those individuals need. So I think, and again, it comes back to that foundation at a young age. They don't need that necessarily high levels of specificity, because they are still building the foundations. But once you get to, I guess, the sharp end of that pyramid, it's such an individualized sport, which is why UK Sport only fund, I think now it's about 55 individuals, because actually the capacity of the system to deliver 55 individual tailored programs is extremely expensive. Whereas at a young age, ultimately, they all need to develop good skills, good habits, good traits, behaviors, all those sorts of things. So, yeah, I don't know if that kind of starts that conversation off.
I actually think that almost answers that question, that it is a personal preference as to which works best for that swimmer.
Elite is very different, I think, because you look at like Mel's Marshall's squad. She's got Adam, and then she's got Luke. You've got a 100-meter breaststroker, and you've got a 200-meter backstroker. They're not going to be doing the same sessions every single day. Yes, they'll do their aerobic sessions maybe together, but when it gets to the race pace stuff, why would Luke do some breaststroke and Adam do backstroke? Doesn't really make any sense. But at that age, the age group age, then they would be all doing it together to focus on the aerobic side of things, So,
I mean, just talk a question, almost pushing it back to you guys from your own swimming journeys. What was the balance between what you wanted to do versus what you actually did?
That's very good. I would have loved to not train at 6 o'clock in the morning and train about 10 o'clock. I think that's when I'm at my peak time, which is a great time to start this live stream. But early mornings weren't great for me. But when we went on to training camp and could train at like 10, I love that. But like you said, every club doesn't have the option of training at 10 o'clock. There's school and everything like that.
I think if you were to survey loads and loads of swimmers, they would say, "Oh, I'd much rather do an evening session than a morning session." Like, I would say 99% of people would choose that. But like Kev says, the pool time isn't always available in the evenings. A lot of the time, it is available in the mornings. I'm trying to remember when I was 14, the majority of my sessions were in the morning, because that's when we could access the pool. Because other clubs were using the pool, or swimming lessons were on, so we couldn't actually use it in the evening. So for me, I was a bit better in the morning, only because I did it more. I experienced it more as a younger age. But for me, I see early mornings as more of a progression on to the next stage. I mean, we spoke to Adam, and he said he didn't start mornings until he was 14. you think, wow, that's incredible, So it's not the be all or end all.
Yeah. I
Just
think Phelps was 15. I think Duncan Scott was
yeah,
14, 15. And that's
Yeah.
not in any way saying that's what everyone should be doing.
yeah,
We kind of highlighted everyone's on their own journey. But it does come back to not just the personal preference, but the personal context. I've swum competitively in various capacities across 25 years now. And for 12 months of that, I had the ideal training. So for 24 out of the 25 years I've been competitively swimming, it wasn't about personal preference. It was about what was available. And
Yeah.
for that one year leading up to London in 2012, I had a unique experience to be a training partner for the London 2012 Olympian. And he started training at 7:30 in the morning. Now, that doesn't happen in the vast majority of programs out there. So I think that we've got to be pragmatic about it. In an ideal world, yes, I'd all love if we started training at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, knocked off around lunchtime, had a bit of a lunch and a chill in the afternoon in an outdoor pool somewhere around the equator. And then we came back at 4, 5 o'clock and we were home by like 6:30, 7. But there's also an honesty that I think we have to have about our situation. And I say so many clubs have got so many challenges at the moment and for the foreseeable future. We might all have a preference of we want to do this and we want to do that. But equally, we've got what we've got.
Yeah. I mean, it was a dream when I went to Cardiff and then morning session started at 8. I was like, oh my God, this is like a 2-hour lie-in compared to what I'm used to. But of course, if you're talking about a 12-year-old, they've got school at 9. So it's impossible, So, yeah.
Okay, shall we move on to a very winter training question that we got submitted beforehand? What clothing should they wear after training sessions when it's cold outside?
What a lovely question. There's a few things. Obviously, apply some levels of common sense, layers. If I see a kid walking across the car park in slippers, shorts, and a t-shirt in January, I'm going to be getting concerned. But I think applying both some common sense, but equally some levels of education to the swimmer themselves, because at a young age they probably don't appreciate it. Some kids don't feel the cold, but that doesn't mean their body isn't affected by it. So I think just actually saying to them, look, do you understand, to be an elite athlete, keeping your body warm is really important. Now, yes, we're probably talking more about like pre-racing and those sorts of things around body temperature, but actually this notion of keeping warm as you come out of a pool is around making sure your body doesn't start breaking down and getting cold, etc. So I think actually saying for that individual, what are they comfortable wearing? Some kids like the big puffer jackets, some like wearing onesies, the woolly hats. I saw after ISL, there was quite a few kids getting those big like beanie hats that they had.
Yeah.
So
They're really good.
Exactly. So I think every kid's going to have their personal preference of how they do it, but they need to understand, or that you can try and get across the understanding of the link between that and performance. And there's enough videos out there of, take Rio 2016 as an example. The finals were all being swum at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night in quite a cold city in the evening. And if you watch the finals videos of all the athletes walking out onto poolside, a lot of them are wearing big puffer jackets and all those sorts of things, and use that tool and say, look, here's a YouTube video of your idol. Here's Michael Phelps walking out on poolside with a knee-length coat on because it's at midnight where he was. So I think a piece around education is much more useful than just telling people, because then they don't necessarily understand the reason why, which then going forwards mean they're less likely to own it. Whereas actually, if they go, I want to be an elite athletes, this is what they do. Therefore, I'm going to lay the foundation for that and start looking after my own health when I leave the pool. So I think it's simple things like that can really, really help. But equally, kids are going to be kids. So if they're absolutely stropping and saying, I'm not getting out of the car with my coat on, you go, that's fine, you're not going training then.
Yeah. See, I was always taught to keep the pressure points warm. So like your wrists, your armpits, your neck, so you can cover with a scarf. But actually, you can lose heat through any part of your body. So your legs. So if you're wearing shorts, like you say, some people don't feel the cold apparently, but your legs will still be affected. So yeah, I'd wrap up with everything and everything, especially when it's like -2 outside, hats, scarf, coats, many layers. It's all about layers. Even if they're thin, it's the layers that trap the heat in. So yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. A few years ago, about 20 years ago, I swam a World Cup in Berlin in February, and it was about -10. About 3 foot of snow outside, and you all wore your ski coats and your salopettes to the pool. And then we all took our empty drawstring mesh bags with us, because then when you walk through the front door, the building was 30 degrees and you all had to take all of your stuff off. And there's all these swimmers walking around with their normal swimming bag and then a bag full of all these ski clothes, because that's how cold it was outside. But if the message is the same, perhaps watered down just a little bit.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I think this question kind of moves quite nicely onto another one, which is, do you have any tips for keeping bugs away during winter? So obviously keeping warm when you go outside when it's cold. We've covered that. Clothing is a key element. And I actually think, thanks to COVID, the education for children to not get bugs is actually pretty good right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it
suppose
really
so.
is. And
Yeah.
I think something that I would also throw in there is prevention is better than cure. The question itself alludes to that around keeping the bugs away. But ultimately, if you get a cough or a cold in the middle of January and it's 2 degrees outside and raining, it's really hard to shake that off. Whereas actually, by making sure you've got a good balanced diet, you're getting in your vitamins and your minerals, you're staying hydrated, hopefully through your nutrition, you're refueling immediately after training, even if that's just a piece of fruit or a smoothie or something in the changing room. So your body's getting that recovery before you've even left the building. Going back to our last question, then you're wrapping up properly and all those sorts of things. You're not allowing yourself to get ill in the first place. And to be honest, if you look at what I would consider some of the most professional athletes out there, they rarely get ill. Unfortunately, sometimes you do, but generally speaking, those that take their health, their nutrition, and they're looking after their body seriously tend to steer clear of a lot of the stuff. And like you say, a lot of kids are now probably hyper aware of that, which is, I hope, a positive when we're talking about this question.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to hydration, to be honest with you. Because I always ask new swimmers when they come into the squad or in their lessons or whatever, I ask them, do you sweat in the pool? And the majority say, no, we don't sweat in the pool. Obviously, you're just wet from the water. And I'm trying to, tell these kids, actually, you probably sweat more in the water than you do when you go out for a run or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not forcing, but, trying to encourage them to drink a whole bottle of water because you sweat in the pool. And then, like, if you go outside and it's freezing, then that's how the bugs, come to you. So
This bottle, I think, is about 750 ml, and in an hour session, that's what an average
should be
person
gone.
will sweat, at least that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think back to my years. Certainly, I was training as a senior from 21 to 25. I would take 2 of those to every single training session, and they would be empty.
Yeah.
Hydration's super important.
It's almost a missing link, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of, again, linking quickly on this topic. When is it okay to train sick, i.e. with a cold? Could you train through it, or would you be advised? I mean, with COVID, it's a dangerous topic, but would you advise them just to rest and recover?
Right. So let's put the disclaimer out there we're not advising everyone to go and train when they're ill. That's the first thing. Let's be honest about that. From a COVID point of view, obviously everyone's doing their testing and all those sorts of things. So hopefully that box is ticked. But I think there's a difference between being what I would call sick and just being a bit under the weather. Like generally, especially young kids going back to school after Christmas, they're picking up the little bugs and coughs and things like that. Normally, let's move back 2 years. And actually, there's a difference between that and the flu. So we're making sure that people are being sensible with making those decisions, but it's a personal decision. If I had, for example, a bit of a cough, go back 8-9 years when I was swimming full time, I'd be overdosing almost on all my fruits and my vegetables and all those sorts of things, wearing my woolly hat, trying to shake it off as best I can. But I'd be cracking on and saying to my coach, look, I've got a bit of a cough at the moment. I won't be pushing myself to the absolute max because I don't want to make myself get a chest infection, but equally, I still want to be here. I remember my housemate in the run up to the 11 trials. He didn't miss a session for 40 sessions on the bounce, and there was plenty of illnesses going around at that point. And whatever he had, he was just like, I'm just going to crack on. And if I need to tone it down a little bit, I will. And if I need to, make sure I'm just like I said, being really sensible with food and sleep and all those sorts of things. I think but it's a personal choice for sure. But I think there's a massive difference between being properly sick and just having a little bit of a cold or under the weather and those sorts of things in a normal environment.
I think the advice I would give from speaking to a lot of these elite guys on our podcast is the past 2 years has opened swimmers' eyes up that it's okay to have a week off if you need to recover. Traditionally, I don't know, say the Michael Phelps era of Beijing, he didn't miss a session for 4 years, essentially. Swimmers thought that they had to train every day, 2 sessions, and if they were ill, they trained through it. I think there's a shift in focus that if you need to take 2 weeks off because you're isolating, it's actually okay. We can get you back to that level. And I'd hope that swimming clubs around the country have spotted that a week off now isn't damaging, and hopefully kids are understanding that as well.
This is the one thing that if I were to rewind time, because I got not ill, but, little niggles of cold and stuff like that, but I plowed through and trained as hard as I could, depending on whether I was healthy or not. And if I was to go back in time, I'd probably actually have 1 or 2 days off, maybe even 3 days off to fully recover because then if I'm pushing myself through, let's say 50% health, then it's only
It
going to
lingers.
have a detrimental effects with the next couple of days or maybe even weeks later, So I'd rather be fully rested, fully recovered, so that you can train properly, and so it doesn't affect you later on.
Just a couple of points on that. I think also thinking about what you can do versus what you can't do. Now, if we take like a very singular traumatic injury, like a broken arm, the volume of kids that I coached over the years that would come in with one of those plastic things over their cast and carry on just kicking for 4 weeks because they were like, I'm not staying out of the water. Now, that's very different to a respiratory illness where you can't necessarily get in and swim and breathe heavily. But I remember I had a kid who burst his eardrum. He got hit on the head with a football or something like that and ended up, but he actually came on poolside. The doctor said you're not allowed in the water for X number of weeks. And he came on poolside and did a land session for the entirety of each swimming session that I did. And I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, I have to be here. And for him, that was how he dealt with it. But it's going to be different for everyone. And I'm going towards the more elite end of the scale here, but I would also think about the resilience aspect of this. If we take the extreme, take a break every time you've got a sniffle and you spend 26 weeks out of 52 weeks a year at home, then that's very different to waking up with a mild, chest infection and actually going, you know what, I'm going to take a week off to make sure this doesn't become something serious. Those are two very different things, because ultimately I remember in 2010 watching Fran Hausel at the Delhi Olympics, got very, very seriously ill while she was there, and I think she won 5 medals because she's got that mentality of like, I'm at the Commonwealth Games, this is like what I've spent my entire year working towards. The fact I'm ill, I'm just going to have to deal with it and crack on. So I think there is a fine balance between that resilience building through dealing with what gets thrown at you, but equally, especially with the youngsters, going, look, is this a proper illness where you really do need to rest? Or is this something that actually we need to crack on, but we need to tone it down a little or stop doing certain types of training? So I think it is going to be different for different people.
Yeah,
definitely. Right. A question in the live chat on YouTube, moving on to sleep. So evening sessions is a little difficult for our swimmer to sleep. She's 9. Would you recommend establishing a workable sleep routine?
Yeah, so I think sleep is a really challenging one. Swimming doesn't lend itself to incredible sleep. Our nutritionist Jazz on AP Plus talks about what you do on average that counts, and I apply that to sleep to a point. So if you've got, for example, your club has a Monday night and your one morning a week is Tuesday morning, you're going to struggle to get your 8.5 hours sleep on it, depending on your timings of your session. But equally, you're going to have other days of the week where you haven't got a morning session, and certainly on weekends, hopefully you haven't got morning sessions both days. So looking across the week and saying, look, there are days when it's 7.5 hours and there's days where there's an opportunity for 9 hours. And actually, and I'm not saying everyone, it's okay to have less sleep. It's not. In an ideal situation, professional athletes that are training full time will be getting at least 8.5 hours a night. So I think we need to establish that at the start. But what I would say is everyone's different when it comes to their routine, and also trying different ways of relaxing and switching off. I think if you, again, go back to the Rio Olympics, because of the timings of the heats and the finals being so all over the place because of the TV schedules, the amount of prep that the British swim team did in sleep leading up to it so that they could get sleep at 3 a.m, but then get back up to perform at like 11 o'clock in the morning. It was really, really interesting. So they're making sure they've got the right curtains in their room, blackout blinds. Have they got the right pillows to allow them to sleep properly? Some of them were using weighted blankets and all these sorts of things. So actually using is there ways of helping somebody sleep better so that even if they're only getting 7 or 7.5 hours sleep because of the training time differences, it's 7.5 hours of quality sleep. So actually not just looking at volume of sleep, but the actual quality of sleep you're getting, because especially this time of year, over a period of lack of sleep, a week, 2 weeks, you will start running yourself down neurologically, and then you're more likely to pick up a cold or a cough or whatever it is.
Weighted blankets is a good little tip in there. I use a weighted blanket. It definitely helps me get better quality sleep.
Do you reckon it's worth having one of those Fitbits? Because you can actually see what kind of sleep you're having with REM sleep and light sleep, etc., etc.
I mean, you've got tons of different things out there. I mean, tons of different apps. Me personally, I had I think it was a Fitbit or something like that, but I got to the point where I'd almost stop beating myself up because of the data. And it's like, it's just a number. Like at the end of the day, like I said, we've got to be pragmatic. If I've got a training session that doesn't finish till 8:30 in the evening, by the time I've got home, had a snack, sorted myself out, relaxed and gone to sleep, it's 10:30. And then I'm getting up at 4:30 in the morning. That's going to be 6 hours sleep, whichever way you cut it. So I think Yeah, it's going to be different for everybody. But what I would say is explore different ways of actually supporting good quality sleep, and then look across the week to make sure that you are blocking out time, if you like, to make sure that if you're losing it on 1 or 2 days a week, you're making up for it on other days. So there's not a sustained period of time where you're not getting the correct sleep.
Yeah.
It's like on training camps. We always used to be shut away for 2 hours in the middle of the day and told to go have a nap. If it's needed, it's needed.
Yeah.
Kind of linking to it, any tips for getting swimmers up in dark mornings? Do you mind if I kick this one off? Because I am a man of habit and I get up at 6 o'clock every morning to walk the dog. I use is it a Lumi light?
Yeah.
Lumi,
So it slowly wakes me up with natural daylight in my face and there's no really sharp alarm. And I find that is the best way to get me up in the morning, is that gentle light to my face rather than the sharp noise. That one, I always wake up and I'm like, oh God, really struggle to get going.
I used to trial and error it with different alarms. So now I have sort of like a sort of a mellow animals tweeting, birds chirping, all that sort of stuff. Where I used to have like a Dixie horn. So it's like, oh my God, I'm awake. So yeah, that doesn't really work. Again, it's personal preference, to be honest with you. You like the Lumi, I just have the natural birds, if you like. But yeah, I don't know. What about you, Kev? Any personal preference?
Lumi light is something, and I'm sure there's plenty of others. I sound like the BBC saying that. I think everyone's going to be different in how they get up in the morning. When I trained full time, my sessions, I was at the pool for 5 a.m. I would get up at 4:30. I had housemates that would get up 10 minutes before me because they wanted a cup of tea, and I'd like, that 10 minutes for me is worth gold. I am staying in bed to the last possible second. But equally, other people prefer I went out to Australia a few years ago and watched a morning session out there at a place called the Southport School, which is where British Swimming used to have a base. And it was dark when we were on poolside at 5:15 in the morning, but the coaches had been there since 4 o'clock and they were up with a coffee, and that was their routine. So I think everyone's going to be different on that sort of stuff. But what I would say is trialing different things is, again, a good way of going about it, because there's lots of different things that can help. Equally, the alarm thing can be put on the swimmer and not just for the parent. I know there are some parents out there that will set their alarms religiously. I know there are some parents, certainly with the teenagers, that say, if you want to go training, you come wake us up. And putting the ownership on the swimmer. So it's different for everybody. But I mean, I know my wife hates, I've got a quacking duck on my alarm, and she absolutely hates it. She's like, what is that noise? And I'm like, I can go back to the klaxon if you want.
Essentially what you're saying is there's two aspects to getting a swimmer up in the morning. It's the method of getting them up, and then the motivation to get them up.
Yeah.
And we spoke about it on our last live stream. It was you need to give the swimmer responsibility to get them up in the morning, and suddenly that might actually get them out of bed.
Yeah, that's the way I had it in my swimming. If I didn't wake my mum up or my dad up, I didn't go swimming. And that's the way I think it should go, to be honest with you. It should be ownership on the swimmer, but it's their career. They want to pursue that sort of journey. Then they should be the ones that wake themselves up, wake their taxi driver up, and off they go to the pool. That's the way I see it.
Okay,
awesome.
Last question from the live stream before I think we take a little break. My son is 9 and swims 5 to 6 times a week. Does he need to start thinking seriously about nutrition, and who would I seek for this advice?
Okay, lovely question there. So I think there's a few things I would consider. Firstly, if you've got any specific stuff, always go down the professional route in terms of a dietitian, sports nutritionist, because ultimately anyone else is not a qualified person to give that advice. If you're looking for general stuff, and certainly at the age of 9, 10, 11, I would be saying kids are laying the foundations for their nutrition as well as all these other behaviors. I would actually look at the different programs that exist out there. So kind of shameless plug here. What we've done with AP Plus is actually saying, look, what if you were developing an age group nutrition foundation would you want? And actually, well, there's a lot that kids need to learn and understand, and you can't do that in just one conversation. That's spread over a good chunk of time. So I think, we're over 100 pieces of content that we've done through AP Plus, because the sports nutritionists who are putting that together are saying, look, this is a massive area, and actually it needs to be drip fed and delivered in quite a child friendly way. So I think at a young age, it's actually recognizing they are young kids and going, here's a a 5-hour presentation on nutrition, and they're not interested.
Gone then. Yeah.
So I think that on its own is a really important point to flag up, that 9-year-olds will be 9-year-olds. But equally, I think back to my years coaching and remember running a camp and a 9-year-old opening their bag and pulling out a bag of Haribo that was their lunch. And you kind of think, I probably need some education work there. So I think there's a balance with 9-year-olds, but ultimately there's this progressive approach to it, but at the age of 9, you're probably going to be laying some very basic foundations on nutrition and hydration. Equally, by the time you're 19 and you're in the Olympic team, you're probably going to have a full-time nutritionist. And then there's a sliding scale in between. But ultimately, the education piece at a young age is so important, because if you don't get the foundations right at a young age, you might have a 16-year-old who's trying to progress to an elite level in sport going, well, I don't eat salad or fruit. I've never understood the reason why I need to do it. And actually you think, well, you're actually going to limit your ability to recover properly. The education piece for me is really, really important. And actually it needs to be appropriate education for that age group, not just here's a book on nutrition, you fill your boots.
Yeah, the link to that AP platform, AP Plus platform, is in the description of this video if you're interested in checking it out. I know there's some really helpful stuff on there. Right, so I think we are going to take a quick 60-second ad break. Chance for anyone who's got any more questions to put them into the live chat. We'll take a quick comfort break during the ad break, and we'll be back in 60 seconds time.
Oh, wicked. Here at Propulsion Swimming, our vision is to give the sports we love the coverage and publicity it deserves. Swimming is an amazing sport, and we believe that it should be given more exposure than it currently gets from traditional media outlets. With the superstars we currently have at the elite level, we want to provide a platform where everyone can watch, listen and be inspired to become the best swimmers they can be. We have a wide variety of videos across our channel, including swimming drills to help improve your technique, podcast episodes where we talk to amazing special guests, and live streams where we talk about popular topics in the swimming world, as well as so much more swimming related content. Come and check out Propulsion Swimming on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and get involved in our community of like-minded swimming fans.
Okay, we're back. Guys, a big question that came in beforehand that we're going to cover now. What should I be focusing on at this time of year? And I'm going to split this up into 2 different categories for you. So one, I'm going to say the swimmer. What should the swimmer be focusing on so that parents get an understanding of what's happening through the winter months? It is a hard training block usually. And then as a parent, what should you be focusing on? So why don't we start with the swimmer? What are they going to be doing in the pool through January, February, March?
Okay, so there's going to be some real ranges here of where people are up to. So if you're, let's say, little Jimmy or little Kate, who's 9 years old and they're their first year in a swimming club, it's probably going to be quite different to what Adam Peaty and Duncan Scott are doing right now. So I think over the coming months, for a start, look where you are as an individual. There's not a blanket answer to cover that. The second thing that I would say, and it's really important to get this across, is ultimately we can look at it as a week or a month or a year. That's ultimately what coaches do. They'll prep that periodized training program that runs across a period of time based around a key number of competitions. But ultimately, what can we do? What we've got today, that's what we can do. So if you actually look at your program, and when I say program as a whole, here's my week. So my week, this week, obviously we're back to school, but let's go, excuse me, let's go to Monday next week where we've got a full normal week, if you like. So I've got 5 swimming sessions. Okay, I'm going to chat to my coach and say, what are we doing this week, coach? And the coach says X, Y, and Z. Right, I'm going to focus on X, Y, and Z. But equally, we just talked about keeping well and healthy and making sure that you're eating the right things. Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to make sure that my nutrition is really good each day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, my snacks, my hydration. Excellent. Right, we're going to have a little think about sleep because that's really important as well. So actually every single day, you've almost got the answers in front of you in the sense of your day is going to be filled up with lots of stuff, and it's focusing on doing each of those things really well so that, excuse the pun, you're better than you were on those things yesterday. And that's ultimately how we progress. So if you can get to a point where in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, you're sleeping slightly better, you're eating slightly better, your focus in training is slightly better, your health is slightly better, then actually you're in a better place than you were 3 weeks ago. So I think what I would say is the focus needs to be on doing everything you're doing each day that makes up your entire day, doing it as best as you can. And ultimately that's enough, because you'll have a day where you're absolutely exhausted, you're feeling a bit run down, it might be Friday evening, and actually you need to just focus on resting and chilling out. That's still a focus. So don't beat yourself up over the fact you need to be on performance all the time. Actually, if focusing for you means on a Friday night or a Saturday morning, you need to lay in a bit of rest, go and chill with your mates, play your PlayStation or whatever it is, that's part of focusing, if that makes sense. You're focusing on recovery. So that's what I would be saying every single day, just making sure you're doing the things that you're supposed to be doing well.
It's not too much to add to that, really. You've basically covered every base there. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be different for different ages, isn't it? I mean, majority of swimmers, club swimmers especially, they're going to be targeting counties because that comes up in January, February, sort of March time as well. And they've just had maybe, let's say, not a full 2 weeks of swimming because of the Christmas New Year period. So they probably want to get back into swing of things, getting the meterage a little bit higher, still focus on that technique, and probably hone a few racing skills, I would have thought, ready for counties, because counties could be their biggest competition of the whole year. You just don't know. This is where the ranges of abilities come into it. But yeah, I mean, I think Kev's covered pretty much everything, to be honest with you.
What about parents then? What should they be focusing on at this time of year during the winter months?
Well, I think this is where, as the difference between the swimmers and parents is quite obvious, it's really important for the parents to be able to step back and see the bigger picture. So if you've got, for example, a 9-year-old, and actually their goal is to just enjoy the sport of swimming, our goal across the next week, month, and the rest of this season is to make sure that that period of time as a whole is an enjoyable experience for the kid. Now, that's going to be different for everyone in how they need to do that. So for some people, they're motivated by competitions, for example. So we need to try and make sure they get opportunities to compete. For other people, they're motivated by seeing their friends. So let's make sure they've got social activities built into their week. So I think it's making sure that as a parent, we've got an eye on the bigger picture, because 9-year-olds don't. If you actually watch, I do quite a lot around childhood psychology, and you actually look at what childhood play is, it's being completely immersed in something and completely oblivious to the outside world and the bigger picture and all of those sorts of things. Whereas the parent is almost the complete opposite. They can see what's going on right now, but equally they're aware of what's coming up next week, next month, next year. So I think as a parent, having the bigger picture in mind and then supporting the child however the parent deems appropriate, whether that's confidence boosting, whether that's supporting them logistically, helping them with their nutrition, supporting them if they're feeling a bit run down or they feel like they're not that motivated. It is going to be different for everybody, but what I would say is the parents very much need to take the adult view of the wider world and let the kids be kids.
I mean, what can parents do? Because I imagine motivation is quite tough. The training does get quite hard sometimes. What could parents do to keep motivation high, inspiration high for these swimmers?
You're talking age group level.
Yeah.
I think the simple one is always starting with the conversation of why do you swim? And what do you enjoy about it? And I think if parents and swimmers are aligned on that and they understand that, the language that a parent chooses to use is always going to be linked back to that enjoyment factor. Because ultimately, if you, even going up to the elite level, if you ask elite athletes, why do they do what they do? They don't say, because I'm getting paid to do it. They say, because I absolutely love it. I've always wanted to do this, and I've now got the opportunity to do it. And I'm so passionate about being the best athlete that I can be. Now, that love and that fun element is embedded so much during the age group level, because swimming is not an easy sport. And certainly as you get older and you start loading up, I guess, the wider life responsibilities of, work and housing and money and all these other things that comes with being a responsible adult. Actually, that's a lot to take in when you're still swimming. So I think it's the fun and that passion and that desire that's developed and honed at such a young age that's ultimately supported by parents. And I can't speak for you guys, but I certainly think back to my younger ages. I went through the ups and downs of swimming, and I had plenty of them, disqualifications, ripped suits, missing events, all those sorts of things. But it was the support I got from my parents. That means that at the ripe old age of 33, I'm still looking back thinking I still love the sport and still want to give as much as I can to it, probably in a slightly different way now.
Yeah,
definitely. So another question that came in beforehand: other swimmers their age are doing more training. Should I push to get my swimmer or my child more hours in the pool? Is this a case of trust the coach, trust what the coach has planned for them because they know where your swimmer's at?
I think it's very easy to get caught up in what's going on immediately around you. I think back to my earlier years when I was swimming. This was before the age of social media. And my knowledge of swimming was basically my county. So I'd go to the counties and I was like, well, I would base what was good based on the 2 or 3 swimmers that were winning everything. Now, I didn't know anything about their clubs, their coaches, their situation, the access that they had as a program. And I think it was brought back to me when I was probably about 15 or 16. There was a girl from my club that qualified for the Olympics, and she came from a program that had 5 hours a week. Now, when she was at university when she went to the Olympics, but my point being is that at a young age, it's not the hours that are going to inhibit you because your club has got what you've got. If your group's got 4 hours available, that's what it's got available. Adam as an age group swimmer was doing you can count the hours on one hand that he was doing in the pool. Hasn't stopped him going on being the greatest swimmer we've ever had. But ultimately, the swimmer is part of a human being, and if you haven't got enough hours in the pool in terms of compared to your peers, then actually there's other ways in which you can develop. They might have 6 sessions a week and you might have 4, but actually you take your land training, really you focus on that, you do your stretching really well, you do your pre and post pool, you hydrate really well each session, you talk to your coaches, you have a great triangle relationship between your coaches and your parents, making sure that everyone's aligned, so that where somebody's gaining a benefit over there and you're worried about that, you can't control that. What you can control is what is going on in your world. So what I would say is comparison is the thief of joy. Stole that off another podcast. And it's but I think it's really important that we get that across, because ultimately if I compare myself to Michael Phelps and go, oh yeah, between, like you said, between Athens and Beijing, barely took a day off, he's made tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars, etc., but that's not my journey. That's not what I'm doing. So I think it's really, really important that we understand that each individual is on their individual journey. Each club is going to be on their own set of circumstances. And actually comparing yourself to others is just going to take your focus and your energy and give it to somebody else, when actually what you've got in front of you is what you've got, and it's the only thing that you can control. And if you invest your time and your energy in that, that's when you're not just going to get your best out of your training, but the whole, sphere that sits around that individual.
Yeah. I mean, if a swimmer qualified for the Olympics at 15 or 4 hours of training a week, and then suddenly they become the best swimmer, let's say, ever, then I think a lot of people will take inspiration from that and end up just doing 4 hours of training a week. So, different journeys, isn't it? Yeah, literally both ways. So I think it comes down a lot to quality versus quantity. It's a big old debate in swimming. We spoke about it very kind of briefly, I guess, on one episode that we did. And I think quality does just about overcome the quantity nowadays. So I wouldn't worry about getting them in the pool to do more and more and more. It's about what they do in their 1 hour, 2 hours per day, per session, which will make a difference.
What I would ultimately say is that every swimmer is almost like a representation of their bookshelf of skills and their development that they've had. And ultimately, if the only thing that we have got left in the tank is to add more of something, we're saying that we have explored every other option to develop that human being. So we've looked at everything from their pre-pool, their post-pool, their psychology, their S&C, the parent support, their actual understanding of nutrition, the journey that they go on, their balance of education, their sleep, and all of these other areas. And until you feel like you've absolutely maximized all those other areas in terms of getting the best out of them and having them in balance, we then should start then looking at the ability to move up volume. Because ultimately, if you get to 15 years old and you've maxed out on volume, there's nowhere else to go. Whereas actually, if you've laid a great foundation in nutrition, psychology, S&C, and your parents have supported your development, and that 15-year-old is still got plenty of space to grow and develop physiologically in terms of their land and pool work, actually, as a coach, that's the dream. You've got somewhere to take them. And I think that's almost the most frustrating part, where it feels like a race to get people to an elite level, and it's not. They're children growing and developing. And actually, the way in which they develop takes time, and you can't rush that. What's appropriate for a 15-year-old Katie Ledecky, who happened to be a fully grown woman by the time she was 15 at the Olympics, is going to be hugely different from an Adam Peaty who wasn't even swimming internationally junior level at that point. So I think it's very different for everybody. And I think we need to try and get that across, that it is an individual thing.
Yeah, definitely. Those points kind of mirror our conversation with Josh Atkins, the development coach at Wickham, where he said he never wants to be the coach, the swimmer's last coach. There always needs to be room for development, and you're laying the blocks. So essentially, whatever age the kid is, you're not aiming to be training like Adam Peaty. You're looking to get to that point.
Well, the last thing you want to be is like a 15-year-old doing 10 sessions a week 4 gym sessions and then they're looking to go to the next level when actually there's no level to go to because they're already maxing out on their sessions. So that it's all about progression, isn't it? You've got to slowly progress through the years. And of course, development comes in. You develop at different times. Like you just used Katie Ledecky as an example. Not everyone is going to be Katie Ledecky, so it will take time. You've got to be patient.
The thing I'd also throw in there, you gave the example of Wickham, and I look at the way that their program is structured with what Josh and Kev and the rest of the team have done there. It's looking at developing an entire holistic group of people from the masters all the way down to like the entry level learn to swim stuff. And I think that's really important to understand that we're an ecosystem of sport, and it's actually about developing everything, not just developing your whole club around one swimmer. And I think that's a real challenge because ultimately, as a sports system, certainly on my experience of 17, coming up 18 years working in sport, I do feel like it's very easy to chase the 1, 2, 3 that are the most successful within your program. When actually, if you're in a program that's only got 3 or 4 sessions a week, it's really important that as a club, you're linking with more performance oriented programs that can offer that next level. Because what you end up doing is then detracting from the experience of everybody else out there. And that's a really difficult message for people to hear. But ultimately, you go to the performance program. The performance program doesn't come to you. And I think that's something that the sports system in this country, not just in swimming, really struggles with.
Yeah.
Okay, another question that's come in on the chat is: we keep mentioning land work. Would you expect a coach to say to their child to start doing that? And now this is a previous commenter whose son is 9 years old.
Okay.
I'm going to say 9 years old is probably too young to start thinking about too much land work.
Yeah, I think the simple one for me would be how we define land work. That's anything that doesn't take place in the pool that is still trying to condition the body. So at a young age, we'll go back to our foundations discussion. What's probably the most important thing when kids are growing and developing is that they don't get injured. What's the best way to prevent that? Doing good pre and post pool. That is regarded, in my opinion, as land training. You could turn up 10 minutes before a session and stay for 10 minutes afterwards. Now, obviously, with the pandemic, that's been a real challenge, but you might have to do it at home before and after, depending on what your logistics situation is. And actually, that in itself is good conditioning to actually get to a point where you've got good mobility, you understand the process of stretching and how to do it. And if you haven't got a land training provider, again, go back 15 years, that was probably a big issue, but the amount of stuff out there now that you can access through the different platforms that exist that actually support people educating youngsters around land work. And I think, it's really easy for people to hear land work and think gym. And it's not. It can be, but it's the same as swimming. Learn to swim doesn't mean diving in the Olympic pool and swimming 50 meters as fast as you can. It's still swimming, but ultimately they're very different things. And I think when we talk about land training, very much pre and post pool, basic stretching can be a really good part of that. And kids actually understanding why they're doing it, getting them to understand their body on land, how it moves, fundamental movement patterns, those sorts of things. And I think kids do that at school. That's what PE is, learning how to move on land.
Yeah. Can I do a shameless plug? In the next either Monday or Tuesday or maybe the week after. So in the next 2 weeks, we have Max Litchfield's pre-pool routine coming up on our YouTube channel. So he's a double Olympic finalist, and he basically talks through why he does each exercise before he gets in the pool. And he recommends that basically you start thinking about this as young as possible to prevent injuries like he had during his career. So that's coming soon.
I have to say, I'm always baffled because, you guys came to the clinic. When we have people talking to youngsters in whatever position it is, land, pool, anything like that, it's amazing how much of an impact those sorts of things have. So on AP Plus, our land training guy is Gordon, and Gordon was at the clinic that we ran over Christmas on Adam's birthday. And I would say probably a quarter of the session was actually them learning and understanding why they were doing what they're doing. So it wasn't just do this, do that, do this, do that. Okay, it's effective in some environments, but actually for young people, especially at the start of their physical journey through sport, understanding why they're doing it, and even if it's a very basic child reason, to prevent injury. Okay, those sorts of things. I think that's really, really important to get across.
Yeah, definitely. So as this, we're reaching kind of the hour mark of this live stream. So I'd say if anyone's got any more questions, now's the time to put them into the chat before we sort of round things up for the day. Few more questions that came in beforehand. It's kind of a big one that's not. It is a big one. Should my child specialize in a stroke? Now, I think we covered it before in a previous live stream about specializing sort of in one race, but why is stroke specialization not great at an age group level?
We need an age for this one, don't we? Really, but yeah,
we do and we don't. I think if we keep it on topic in terms of winter training, this is where the scenario is right now. A lot of young people are preparing for the county championships, and actually, especially youngsters, might qualify in a range of events. So, and go, well, where do I focus? And it's like, you don't need to treat the county championships as something that is going to be the start and end of your career. Okay, you're going to have races that are going to go well. You're going to have races that won't go well. But ultimately, through your training, you keep doors open by doing a range of both distances and strokes. And I think that's really important to get across, because if you look at two of our most successful male and female swimmers that are multi-eventers, look at Duncan Scott and Siobhan O'Connor, and the range of different British records that they hold, short course and long course, and different events. And that's come from when they were younger, not specializing. Now, equally, there are people like a Ben Proud who did specialize, but ultimately his physiology at 16, 17, 18 was leaning towards being a 50 freestyler, but he didn't do that when he was 5. Okay, so I think it's, I'm being ridiculous, obviously, but I think it's important to get across that if you start closing doors early, you can really limit the routes that you can then go down further down your swimming.
Something that I did essentially when I was 15, I decided I was only going to race 150 freestyle, and I dropped out competitive racing at a year later, 16, because it wasn't going anywhere. No one really educated me that, you know what, it's okay to look elsewhere. Suddenly I'm 27 back in the sport and I'm doing 10K open waters. It's very different journey. So maybe had I not specialized down myself and taken that route, I probably would have stayed in the sport a bit longer.
Most, if not all, coaches will be coaching swimmers to be good 200 IM swimmers. That's really what the aim is. Whether they should be doing that so that they can be so versatile and so keeping doors open. We spoke to Ed Mildred, I think we mentioned this last time actually, that even though he's more suited right now to 100 free, maybe 100 fly as well, he's open to be doing a 400 IM, a 200 backstroke, because he hasn't maybe fully developed. He's 18, but he's maybe not fully developed, and he doesn't quite know what his main event is just yet. So he wants to keep those doors open and doesn't want to keep it as a narrow path just yet.
Yeah, it's like Jacob Peters, actually. Again, you look beforehand, we thought he was or from watching him at Olympic trials, we thought he was a 50 fly swimmer. But actually, you speak to him, his whole training through all of his age groups, it was 200.
At pool, yeah.
But suddenly he's got to that elite level and they've recognized, you know what, you're better at shorter distances.
Yeah.
But he's got that foundation in place that has allowed him to look at different events.
Yeah.
And I'd also tie that to that last comment around what's the objective of staying engaged in the sport. We are not saying go and enter every single event and you should do every single stroke and every single distance. That's not what we're saying at all. Or what we're saying is just try and keep a range of doors open. That might be 50, 100, 200 breaststroke and one other event, 200 medley or 100 IM. But it's just getting to the point that you don't want to be forcing swimmers to do everything, but equally you want to keep doors open for the future.
Yeah, I mean, Jacob Whistle's a prime example. He's pretty good at 50, 100, but actually he's keeping his doors open to maybe go to the 200, maybe even the 400, to build that aerobic base. You still need an aerobic base if you're a 100-meter freestyler. You just have to look at Kyle Chalmers, for example. So, keep doors open, in summary.
Okay, guys, I think that is a very nice point to end this week's Swimming Parent Support live stream. Thank you so much for everyone who has joined us on the chat and joined us live and submitted their questions. This video will be up and live, not live, but able for people to review.
Yeah.
Available. There's the word.
That's the word. Yeah.
Will be available for your viewing leisure on our YouTube channel if you want to check back on any of the questions. We're planning to be back next month. That's the plan. I believe we might have a special guest lined up to join us, but we will confirm
fingers
that one.
Fingers crossed. Yes, fingers crossed.
But yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's joined us.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. Hopefully we'll be seeing you guys again next week. Look forward to having a special guest on, and it's a big guest as well.
Next month.
So, yes. Next month. Sorry. So used to doing a podcast every week. So next month, yes. First weekend of every month is the plan. Yeah.
Great stuff. Guys, if you haven't subscribed already, please do so to the Propulsion Swimming YouTube channel, and we will see you all in a month's time.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. We'll catch you on the next one.